First of all, I'd like to know what it's meant for you to be the producer, executive producer, as an actor,
Mm-hmm.
an actress,
Mm-hmm.
and how that is affected.
Mm-hmm.
If that has allowed you, if that has allowed you to have more of a say on what your character is like.
Uh-huh. Well, for the first part of the question, ultimately, throughout my time in this job, I've always been really keen on learning about all of the elements of it. So sitting with the directors at Video Village, talking to the writers of any project that I've been on, engaging with the producers, and even chatting with camera operators and so on and so forth. So where I think that for some actors it's really important to just be an actor and just be in front of the camera. For me, it's always been really interesting to be both in front of the camera and to engage with the other side of storytelling. So some actors are storytellers and some actors truly are just, actors and focused on that part of it. So it's been a very natural progression, ultimately, for me. The second part of the question?
Is if that has allowed you to have more of an input on what your character's like.
Yeah. The role that I play as an executive producer doesn't necessarily exclusively fold into only my character. I've been working in this industry for a while now, and it's been really interesting to see how much information I've absorbed over the years. So I've almost undergone a version of filmmaking university. So in some ways, I hope, and I do believe, I'm able to help assist the story as a whole. So when we talk about how are we going to convey a message for this character, for that storyline, for this arc, or at least propel the story forward, I'm able to work with the directors and say, okay, maybe suggest sometimes a camera idea or an angle or a shot that we might need. And then even in the editing process at the end in post-production, help convey elements of the story that we need in order to have a very sort of like addictive thriller, just by sheer experience, right? And ultimately, storytelling, filmmaking is not a solo sport. So I'm working with all of these other talents, and where I might fail the story somewhere, other producers or directors or even actors are able to elevate it, and we've all got the same goal ultimately. We all want to tell a great story, so we're all working together towards that end. How is that answer? Really bloody long!
How did you prepare for the role of Emily in developer background?
Yes. So we were really concerned about making sure that we could ground this character because the world is so extreme. And her experience in life is so extreme. So one of the resources that we went to was the heroes and some of the survivors of the events of World War II. And then in addition to that, there are of course many cataclysmic, unfortunately, events since then internationally that we were able to resource, whether it was through a news article, whether it was through a book, in order to make sure that the story and the character were very grounded in a level of reality, an emotional reality. There's something also that I haven't spoken about, and this was an interesting kind of exploration and bit of research. I can't pretend that this conveyed the character in any sort of direct path, but it did influence elements of it. I met a woman named J.C. Dugard. She was kidnapped when she was 10 years old, and she was kept in captivity for 19 years. And some of her story was, it was just information for me to have, in the sense that how do people have their identity stripped away from them completely? And how does somebody try to rebuild that after they survive an event like that? Of course, her experience is something that I would never be disrespectful towards or pretend to even remotely understand, but it was a piece of information for me.
The story of your character in Absentia is a person that has a great deal of trauma, a great deal of suffering, a great deal of anxiety. Did any of that ever go home with you in the evenings, after work?
There is nothing that a glass of wine cannot conquer sometimes after filmmaking.
Spanish wine.
Hey.
Emily is a character that has required a great deal of effort, both emotionally and physically. What has that physical demand meant to you portraying this character?
I love it. I love doing stunts. I love fight sequences. I love like jumping from really high places. I love wearing bungee cords, all of that. That was fun for me. We had a stunt crew that was working with us, and I wasn't the only character that actually had to do stunt sequences, so that was fun to see the other actors also work their way through some of the choreography. And our stunt team this season actually came from, they worked on a lot of the Game of Thrones seasons as well, so they're just like top-notch people.
How's your work changed from going in the first season one director to having 3 directors in the second?
Yeah. Ultimately, this version was more manageable. Telling a story for 10 episodes and doing any episode on any given day is so challenging, especially when you're telling something as demanding as this sort of story is. So it was demanding for the director who shot our first season, as well as for all of us as actors, because we would shoot, let's say in one day we'd shoot a scene from episode 2, and then in the afternoon a scene from episode 7, and then in the evening a scene from episode 1. So we were jumping around a lot, and that was challenging to keep track of, because there's a definitive arc for all of these characters as they progress through our story. This season, we shot it as if it was 3 chapters of a movie, so almost like a 3-part film. And each director had sort of a self-contained film that he or she were filming. So I think that was more manageable for each director as far as fatigue and as far as maintaining sort of a sense of continuity for each of the storylines.
Yesterday in the presentation, you mentioned that you would like to get behind the camera.
Yeah.
Is that something that you would do exclusively, or would you combine it with acting as well?
It depends on the story. So to do something like that for a movie or a show like this, it's really challenging because the character is so demanding emotionally, physically, and so on. But I got to kind of direct some of our second unit stuff this season, and that was really fun. Just a small bit, but it was a great taste, and my crew came and we had a really lovely time together filming it. So ultimately it would be great, and to be able to do both in front of the camera and behind the camera I think would be a challenge. Bradley Cooper did it wonderfully recently, and I'd love to see if I could do it. But I think initially, as one gets experience in directing, I'd love to just be able to focus in one sort of sphere first.
Okay, I think this was already asked, but if you made your own series or movie,
Yeah.
Would you want to be solamente just the director, or would you want to do both, direct and act?
It depends on the project. At first, I think when I do direct the first time, I think I want to be able to focus just on directing. But as my sort of comfort level with directing gets better, I'm not opposed to experiencing both ends of it. But it really depends on the story. Something like this, something like Absentia, it would be very difficult to jump both in and out of character in order to convey the story. You know who does it really well is like George Clooney. He does it really well. But he often takes smaller roles when he's directing as well. And then Brad Cooper, like I said earlier, he did a really nice job of it with A Star Is Born.